Welcome to the first episode of Season 2 of Gaming Origins, the series where we look at the origins and history of various topics in gaming. For today's episode, we are taking a look at Sonic the Hedgehog, one of gaming's most iconic series over the last 26 years. Due to the huge amount of games in the Sonic series, I won't be going over every single game, but we'll be focusing mainly on the core titles. Sonic's inception began back in April of 1990 when Sega wanted to create a character that was capable of competing against the incredible success Nintendo was having with Mario, and also replace their current mascot, Alex Kidd. A number of different designs were drawn up that were vastly different from the iconic blue hedgehog design we ended up getting, with the most notable ones being a rabbit-like design that could grab objects with its ears, and even one that resembled Dr. Eggman that would later go on to serve as a design for the main antagonist character. The design Sega ultimately went with, of course, was one we've all grown to love over the many years, and was designed by Naota Oshima with the name Mr. Needlemouse, before being changed to Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic's striking blue colour was based on Sega's own logo, with his shoe buckle inspired by Michael Jackson and his vivid red shoes by Santa Claus. Even more interesting was his personality was based on Bill Clinton's get it done attitude. The idea behind Sonic the Hedgehog was a 2D platformer with a big emphasis on speed, with a speed element influenced by the first level of Super Mario Bros, where Yuji Naka stated, "I always tried to get through the level as fast as I could, and wanted to base a game around that core concept." 15 of the employees at Sega came together to form Sonic Team and began to develop the game. Sonic the Hedgehog would go on to release in the middle of 1991 for the Sega Genesis, or Mega Drive as it's known in the UK, with alternate versions of the game also appearing on the Master System and Game Gear later on in the same year. Throughout the stages would be littered gold rings for Sonic to collect. Taking a hit from an enemy, one possession of rings will cause him to fly in different directions, and you'd have a small opportunity to pick up as many as you can, as taking damage without any would result in death. Players would also be rewarded if they managed to pick up 100 rings with an extra life. In each level are a number of power-ups to aid you, like temporary invincibility and shields that Sonic can pick up, some in locations that are difficult to get to or hidden, prompting exploration. Making it to the end of a level with 50 rings, and Sonic can gain access to a special stage, with a potential prize of obtaining one of the 6 Chaos Emeralds. The game sold incredibly well and was a resounding success for Sega. The game scored 86% overall, with one reviewer even noting it had more depth of play than even Mario. Shortly after the release of Sonic 1, programmer and creator Yuji Naka left Sega due to a falling out with the company, though his absence didn't last long, as he almost immediately moved to California to take a job at the newly formed Sega Technical Institute. This new subsidiary of Sega would go on to spearhead the development of a sequel to the hit Hedgehog game, and in November of 1991, development on Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Sega Genesis began, with the game releasing almost exactly 1 year later. The sequel made a few additions that would become staples of the series, the first being the Spin Dash, a move where Sonic spins on the spot before being given an instant boost of speed that was invaluable for those many times you'd lose momentum and can't get up a ramp or through a loop. The second of these was the inclusion of a sidekick for Sonic, a two-tailed fox named Miles Per Hour, a play on words for miles per hour, though he goes by his nickname Tails. Tails mostly just follows Sonic around for the majority of the game, but he can be controlled directly if you select him at the beginning. Finally, there's the addition of a 7th Chaos Emerald and the introduction of Super Sonic, which Sonic can transform into once all the emeralds have been collected. The game was received very positively by fans and critics, achieving a solid 88% on game rankings and going on to become the second highest selling game on the Genesis after Sonic 1, as well as being widely regarded as one of the greatest games ever made. The next game in the series wouldn't be Sonic the Hedgehog 3, but instead Sonic CD for the Sega CD, an add-on for the Sega Genesis, and a few years later ported to the PC. Sega wanted to create a Sonic game that could show off what their new add-on was capable of, with the project's original inception being an enhanced port of Sonic 2, the idea of having additional levels, animated cutscenes, and fully orchestrated music. However, due to lower sales than expected of Sonic 2 in Japan, changed into a new game entirely. At its core, the gameplay was the same as the others, but a time travel mechanic was introduced, moving between past, present, good future, and bad future versions of stages, resulting in a change of aesthetic, layout, and music. Sonic CD would also be the debut of 2 well-known characters that would feature in many more games, Amy Rose and Metal Sonic. Sonic CD was a lot more the same in many regards, but that certainly wasn't a bad thing at all, as the game is considered one of the best in the series, praised for its graphics, gameplay, and audio. In 1994, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was released for the Genesis and began development shortly after the release of the second game. The game was originally planned to be isometric, but the concept was abandoned early on as the team didn't want to alter the gameplay too much from the predecessors. Much like the second, Sonic 3 introduced a new character, Knuckles the Echidna, although at least in the case of the base game, isn't a playable character. Sonic 3 increases the size of stages dramatically, being 3 times bigger than those of the previous games, with more secrets to find and more routes to explore. Sonic 3 was also the first game in the series to feature a save system, something that's taken for granted today, but at the time was an incredibly important addition. Another notable feature of Sonic 3 was with its lock-in technology, where you could combine the cartridges of Sonic 3 and also Sonic & Knuckles, a separate game that released later in the same year that followed on from the end of 3. Combining the two created Sonic 3 and Knuckles, that was originally intended to be one game, allowing Knuckles to be playable in Sonic 3 levels and Tails playable in the Sonic & Knuckles levels, along with some other additions like altered boss forms, super emeralds that gave Knuckles and Tails super forms, and an extra ending. The game garnered 89% overall, slightly higher than 1 and 2, with most critics giving it undying praise, although some felt it didn't innovate as much as it could have. A couple of years later, and a new Sonic game released that made some interesting changes to the core gameplay. Sonic 3D Blast released on the Genesis, Sega's new console the Saturn, and also the PC, with the Saturn and PC version being improved ports with better graphics and CD quality audio. Sonic 3D Blast is an isometric game using 2D backgrounds and pre-rendered 3D sprites, giving a kind of false sense of 3D that looked a little dated when compared to the likes of Super Mario 64 that released during the same year. The core of the game is in finding flickies, birds that have the power to travel anywhere the Robotnik is trying to use for his own evil plans, leaving it up to you to go through each act, gathering them up and placing them inside of large rings in order to save them. Each flicky has different behaviours depending on their colour. For example, blue ones will attempt to find Sonic, while green ones will wander around aimlessly, even potentially avoiding Sonic. 3D Blast was the first game in the series to receive mixed reviews, with an aggregate of 67% for the flagship Saturn version. The main negatives given were that the core gameplay of speed and action you expect from a Sonic game was lost, and obtaining flickies felt like an arbitrary fetch quest. The next game, Sonic Adventure, would be a major change for the Sonic series as it moved into the realm of 3D. Sonic Adventure released in the West in 1999 as a launch title for Sega's new console, the Dreamcast. Development of the game began in 1997 as a Sega Saturn title before being moved to the Dreamcast, with some of the work for the scrapped Saturn title used in the Sonic World mode that appeared in Sonic Jam. Sonic received a redesign, a much taller, slimmer appearance, along with the first time a voice to match his new image. The game splits its levels between 6 characters. Sonics are, as you would expect, platforming levels that have an emphasis on speed, Tails are primarily races against Sonic, Knuckles are locating pieces of the Master Emerald, E102 Gammas revolve around shooting through stages, Amy's are more combat focused while avoiding an invincible robot chasing her, and finally the last controversial character, Big the Cat, that surrounds fishing. Each character has the ability to move around various hub world areas where you'll complete various tasks and access the various stages the game has to offer. For the series' foray into 3D, there is a much bigger focus on story with a lot of cutscenes, along with a new adversary Chaos under Eggman's rule, that with each Chaos Emerald acquired becomes a little bit stronger and an even bigger threat to Sonic. The game scored a very respectable 87% on game rankings and was seen as a successful move into 3D for the series. The game was criticised by some, however, for various glitches, poor voice acting and twitchy controls, which stand out quite a lot when looking at the game today. However, Sonic Adventure did a lot right for its time. Following Sonic Adventure's success, a sequel went into development shortly after, once again for the Dreamcast. For the follow-up, Sonic Team wanted the game to be more action-based, as opposed to Sonic Adventure's arguably slower pace, where you'd spend a lot of time exploring the different hub world areas, and decided not to have one for Adventure 2, but instead opt for the classic Stage Select. The game was primarily broken up into 2 stories, Hero and Dark, with 3 different gameplay styles across them, Sonic, Knuckles and Tails for the Hero story, and Shadow, Rouge and Eggman for the Dark story. The Sonic and Shadow stages are 3D platforming levels with an emphasis on speed, Knuckles and Rouge stages have you hunting for pieces of the Master Emerald, and finally Tails and Eggman stages revolve around mech-based shooting. Sonic Adventure 2 introduced what would become one of the series' favourite characters, Shadow the Hedgehog, who would serve as one of the main antagonists of the game and Sonic's rival. Following the Dreamcast demise shortly after the release of the game, a year later Sega released Sonic Adventure 2 Battle for the Nintendo GameCube, a port that improved some of the graphics, but most notably added new features to the Chow Garden, in the form of viewable stats for each Chow, an additional Chow Karate mode, and also a black market. The first Sonic Adventure was also ported over to the GameCube under the name Sonic Adventure DX Director's Cut with various improvements. Sonic Adventure 2 achieved an average of 89% on Metacritic, with critics praising its graphics, even going as far as to call them jaw-dropping, and that it was an improvement over the original. It was however noted that the game suffered from camera issues that would occasionally get in the way of the gameplay. Sonic Adventure 2 even today remains a favourite amongst fans, with many still hoping a third will be released one day. 6 months after Sonic Adventure 2 hit Dreamcast, Sega released a title for the first time outside of one of their consoles, this time on a Nintendo platform, the Game Boy Advance, which was something nobody could have possibly imagined happening in the 90s. The game plays much like the original Genesis titles, but retains the Sonic Adventure designs, as well as gameplay elements like rail grinding, and gives a choice of 4 characters to play as: Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy across 9 different zones. In 2002 and 2004, the Game Boy Advance would get 2 more titles, Sonic Advance 2 and 3. Sonic Advance 2 featured a new original character to play as, Cream the Rabbit, that is joined by her chow friend Cheese, and has the ability of temporary flight much like Tails. While Sonic Advance 3 introduced the addition of a second character that would tag alongside you during each level. Sonic Advance launched to critical acclaim with 87%, with the sequels also received pretty positively with 83% for Sonic Advance 2 and 79% for Sonic Advance 3. In 2003, the series would receive its next major console release, titled Sonic Heroes, that released on the PS2, Xbox and GameCube. Sonic Heroes is split into 4 teams: Team Sonic, Dark, Rose and finally Chaotix, with each of their stages being of a different difficulty level. Team Rose is the easiest, aimed at younger gamers, while Team Dark and Chaotix are the hardest. All of them feature 3 characters that have an attribute: speed, power and flight, which you'll change between often during each level to either get past various obstacles or defeat enemies. Heroes brought back Metal Sonic as the main antagonist of the game, along with a new form, which was a refreshing return for the character. The game received mixed reviews of 69% on average, with the PS2 version scoring the worst due to clipping, graphical issues, and a lower frame rate than the other versions due to the team's lack of familiarity with the console. There was a lot of criticism of the team-based gameplay along with the camera, although the graphics were praised as colourful and vibrant. In November of 2005, and releasing at the same time as a new console title, the Nintendo DS was graced with its first Sonic game, Sonic Rush. Sonic Rush is a similar game to the earlier Sonic Advance titles, but makes use of the dual screens of the DS by extending the gameplay across them. Backgrounds in the game are mostly comprised of sprites, but various character models are rendered in 3D, and the two blend surprisingly well. During boss battles, the game will also shift into 3D, which was nice considering the DS's limitations. You play as Sonic and new character Blaze the Cat as you once again try to take down Eggman, but also Eggman Nega, his descendant from 200 years in the future. Collecting rings through each stage will fill a boost bar that will allow a burst of speed and also defeat enemies. Using it is essential to make it through stages fast and obtain the higher ranks. A sequel titled Sonic Rush Adventure released 2 years later and introduced more 3D segments and dialogue, although some weren't happy you had to replay levels in order to progress. Sonic Rush, much like the advanced titles, achieved good reviews with 82% for the first and 78% for the second. Sega wanted to introduce a Sonic game that targeted a slightly older audience, with one of the series' favourites, Shadow the Hedgehog, as a focus, delving deeper into the character's origins after his introduction in Sonic Adventure 2. Shadow the Hedgehog, although at its core played very similar to Sonic Adventure 2, made some stark changes, with the most notable and controversial being the introduction of guns that Shadow could use along with vehicles as well. Graphically, the game had a much darker tone with a much muddier colour palette to go along with the more mature target audience. The plot revolves around an alien species attacking Earth under the leadership of Black Doom, who is revealed to have a hand in Shadow's creation. The game gives you the choice of how the plot unravels by helping Black Doom, Gun or neither, with 10 possible endings and an additional true ending once you unlock them all. Shadow the Hedgehog was seen as an unsuccessful experiment, scoring 48% on average, with fans not appreciating the addition of guns or the more mature tone. The game's controls were also criticised, with the homing tech often resulting in unfair, cheap deaths. Critics did praise the game for its replayability, however, with numerous different endings and branching paths. The next release was titled simply Sonic the Hedgehog, although dubbed by fans as Sonic 06 to differentiate it from the original, and was meant to be a reboot of the series. Sonic 06 was a game with a lot of promise, but also a lot of troubled development. For this reboot, the team went with a much more realistic look than other previous games, and Sonic received a minor redesign, making him taller, slimmer and with longer spikes. The game, like many before, is split into different stories, this time Sonic, Shadow and newcomer Silver, a hedgehog from the future that has telekinesis. The Sonic stages play as you would expect, Shadow's are more combat focused, and Silver's play heavily on his telekinesis ability. At some point during development, Yuji Naka, the game's leading developer, left the company, which had a massive impact on the game's progression, leaving the rest of the team without a clear direction. Originally, Sonic 06 was due to release on the 360, PS3, Wii and PC. but due to realising how much weaker the Wii was in comparison to the other consoles, and therefore requiring much more work to get it onto the system, they decided to scrap this idea along with the PC release due to serious time constraints. They still plan to release a Sonic game for the Wii, and therefore half of the team was split to work on an entirely new game for the system, leaving nowhere near as many staff required to properly work on Sonic 06. That, along with a deadline of holiday 2006, the game was rushed to release with a lot of intended features omitted. Sonic 06 achieved 45% overall on Metacritic, and is often regarded as one of the worst games in the series to date due to the multitude of glitches, poor controls, long load times, and ultimately just feeling unfinished. The game had amazing potential and could have turned out to be one of the best in the series had there been less development issues or no forced holiday release date. In 2007, the Wii received a Sonic game that also attempted to make use of the motion controls the console had to offer, with a working title of Sonic Wildfire before being changed to Sonic and the Secret Rings. Sonic travels to the world of the Arabian Nights for a book where he'll battle a genie known as a Razor Jinn. Many alternate versions of Sonic characters appear in the game, such as Tails as Ali Baba or Dr. Eggman as King Shahryar. Sonic's movement is on rails, using motion controls to move him side to side or as homing attack to defeat enemies. He can come to a temporary halt or move backwards, but the game will automatically keep Sonic moving forward otherwise. Sonic and the Secret Rings received average reviews with 69% overall, with many finding the controls taking some time to get used to and at times frustrating. Beginning development in 2006 was a new game that was originally intended to be a third game in the Adventure series, with at one point the title of Sonic World Adventure before being changed to Sonic Unleashed in the West. Interestingly, the game kept the title of Sonic World Adventure in Japan however. The PS3 and 360 versions were developed by Sonic Team, while the Wii version was developed by Dimps. Sonic Unleashed starts off unusually from others, with a CGI cutscene showing Sonic in possession of the Chaos Emeralds and turning into Super Sonic, something we really only see at the end of most Sonic games. Eggman, despite Sonic in his super form, manages to trap and use a device that turns him into a werehog and send him crashing to Earth. The game is comprised of daytime segments where Sonic remains in his usual form in fast-paced platforming levels, and also nighttime segments where he changes into his werehog form in stages that are more like an action hack and slash game that's very combat focused with little platforming. Sonic Unleashed scored a rather low 61% across its releases, with the Wii version garnering the highest reviews. The majority of the game's criticism was of the nighttime werehog missions, feeling that they didn't really fit in with a Sonic game and that the combat was repetitive, while most were positive of the daytime stages, praising the sense of speed and that they wished the game was made purely of those stages alone. The Wii got another storybook game in 2009, this time set in the world of King Arthur, where Sonic will once again meet alternate versions of familiar characters. The Black Knight is essentially the same as Sonic and the Secret Rings, although the game is less on rails, which is a small but substantial improvement that the team made sure to make after gaining feedback on the first. The other big difference is that Sonic now wields a sword, which thankfully doesn't look nearly as out of place as another particular character who wielded a weapon a few years prior. Although Sonic and the Black Knight made some noticeable improvements over the Secret Rings in certain areas, the game scored worse, with only 54% on Metacritic, criticised for its basic and tedious gameplay, but also that the controls were often unresponsive. A third game in the storybook series was originally planned, but due to the game's poor reception, was ultimately scrapped. In 2010, Sega attempted to go back to its roots with a game that emulated the classic Genesis titles. Sonic the Hedgehog 4 was created by Dimps, although with the assistance of Sonic Team, and had some big boots to fill, with being pegged as a direct sequel to the original 3 games. Sonic 4 released in episodic downloads, with the second episode releasing a couple of years later in 2012. The game made some decisions that left fans a little irked. For starters, it features Sonic's modern look and not his classic one, with fans even running a petition to try and get classic Sonic's image added into the game. A homing attack was also added, a staple move from the modern titles, however many thought it didn't fit nor was necessary in a game that was intended as a homage to the classics. Episode 2 was largely more of the same as the first, with the major addition being the inclusion of Tails and co-op gameplay. The game wasn't received quite as well as hoped, scoring 73% for the first episode and a lower score of 62% for the second episode on Metacritic. One of the main criticisms noted was the physics being quite different from the Genesis titles and not sticking quite to the classic gameplay, with additions like the homing attack being seen as a step backwards. At the end of the same year, Sonic Colors would release for the Wii. Sonic Colors' core gameplay was much like Sonic Unleashed daytime levels, although it would more commonly switch to a 2D perspective for platforming segments. After obtaining feedback from fans on previous games, they decided to keep Sonic as the only playable character and also gimmicks to a minimum, after previous attempts didn't pan out so well. Alien creature power-ups known as Wisps were added into Sonic Colors with 8 in total, giving Sonic temporary abilities, For example, yellow ones would allow him to burrow through certain types of ground and water, while the blue one acts like a laser that can bounce off different surfaces. As you progress through the game and unlocked more of them, you could go back to earlier levels and use them to discover new paths and ways to beat the level, which was praised as an inventive way of adding replayability. Sonic Colors obtained 78% on Metacritic and was generally well liked by critics, considered as one of the best Sonic games in recent years by fans. The inclusion of wisps was also received positively as a game mechanic. Fast forward 1 year to 2011 and it was Sonic's 20th anniversary, and Sega didn't miss the opportunity to celebrate it, releasing Sonic Generations. Sonic Generations is a compilation of a number of popular levels from Sonic's history, built completely from the ground up that feature a modern Sonic and classic Sonic version, pleasing both fans of the old and new style of gameplay for the first time. Playing much loved stages like Chemical Plant or City Escape in HD is a great experience and fantastic fan service for long-term players. The plot surrounds a new villain called the Time Eater who pulls Sonic's friends through wormholes into different points in time, leaving it up to classic and modern Sonic to travel to those locations, save them and fix time. The plot is quite throwaway and the game could have gotten away without one at all, but it serves its purpose in justifying why the characters are playing through previous old levels, so in that sense it works perfectly well. Sonic Generations was received positively, scoring 77% on Metacritic, with critics praising the game for how well the levels have been recreated, although it did receive some negatives regarding occasional frame rate issues and laggy controls. Despite not being perfect, Generations is regarded as one of the better titles of recent years that many remember fondly. The next game, Sonic Lost World, released for the Wii U as part of a deal with Nintendo and Sega, although the game did release later on the PC as well. Sonic Lost World is often jokingly called by fans as Sonic Galaxy, after the clear inspiration from the Mario Galaxy games that share a similar theme and level design. Stages take place on floating spherical-like worlds, and along with that a slightly altered control method for Sonic. Instead of Sonic building momentum when pushing forward on the analog stick, Sonic would keep to a slow jog unless you also pressed a button in addition, that would then put him into a fast sprint. This was changed with the idea of giving the player more precision and control. Wisps that were so well received in Colors make a return also, along with some new powers, such as one that temporarily turns Sonic into an eagle, giving him flight. Sonic Lost World got a lot of mixed reviews with 63% overall. Some thought it was a great title in the series, while others thought it was a misstep compared to Colors and Generations. In late 2014, Sonic received a new game for the Wii U, which was released exclusively for the platform due to the 3-game deal that Sega signed with Nintendo. Under the name of Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, they made some controversial redesigns to many of its cast, with some subtle and some quite drastic. Rise of Lyric was developed by Big Red Button and acts as a prequel to the tie-in Sonic Boom TV show that would go on for 2 seasons. The game was an action-adventure game deviating from the series' platforming roots and emphasis on speed, with a much bigger focus on combat. You play as Sonic, Tails, Knuckles and Amy, with each character having their own abilities. For example, Tails can fly and Amy has the use of a hammer. A newly introduced energy whip-like weapon called an Enerbeam is introduced in Sonic Boom, which can be used in combat and puzzles by lashing onto objects or enemies and pulling them towards you. The plot revolves around the 4 characters as they tackle a new snake-like villain called Lyric that Sonic accidentally releases from his 1,000-year imprisonment and wants to destroy the world. The game received one of the lowest scores, if not the lowest in Sonic's history, with an average of only 32% on Metacritic. The game was criticised for its poor performance, bugs that occurred regularly, puzzle segments that were described as dull, and the combat uninspired. Moving forward to the present, and 2017 was a big turnaround for the series, with the release of Sonic Mania. Sonic Mania is special for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it provides a completely original Genesis Sonic experience that Sonic 4 only half attempted, but most incredibly is that it's created by long-term fans of the series, most notably Christian Whitehead and Simon Tomley. Stages are comprised of well-known classics, but also new ones like Press Garden Zone, that especially in the case of the second act, looks amazing and just as good as some of the originals. The plot revolves around new villains created by Eggman known as the hard-boiled heavies that you fight against in the various and creative boss battles. Collecting all the Chaos Emeralds across the special stages and you'll unlock the true ending, adding some longevity and reason to go back to completed stages. With a Metacritic of 85%, Sonic Mania is one of the highest reviewed games in the series, not just recently, also in its 26 years of history, giving fans something they've wanted for many years, and hopefully we'll see more Sonic Mania-like games in the future. Finally, this leads us up to the next Sonic game to be released, Sonic Forces. Sonic Forces releases right around the corner of this year and brings back the gameplay from Sonic Generations. We play levels as classic Sonic that emulate the old Genesis titles, and also modern Sonic stages that use the boost formula that the later 3D titles have been known for. New to Forces is a third gameplay style where you'll be able to create your own character, based on 7 different animal templates that can utilise different weapons of your own choosing, known as Wispons, that will allow you to tackle stages in different ways. A new harrowing villain is introduced for Sonic to defeat, known as Infinite, along with some returning ones from past games, such as Shadow, Metal Sonic, Zavok and Chaos, making this potentially the toughest situation Sonic has faced. So far, Sonic Forces looks like a really promising title in the series that will hopefully at least match what Generations accomplished. The Sonic series has certainly had its ups and downs over the years, with some genuinely great titles and some not so great. However, it appears Sega seem to be giving fans what they've wanted for years with Mania and Forces, and hopefully this trend continues in the future, as it has one of the most passionate fan bases in gaming even today. That's it for the first episode of Season 2. Be sure to like and maybe even sub if you want to see more content just like this. Click the thumbnail on the left for the last episode, and the one on the right for another Sonic related video. Thanks for watching as usual, and I'll see you on the next video.